There are certain truths in life that are hard to digest, truths that challenge the very foundation of our relationships, our emotions, and sometimes even our faith. One of those hard truths is the reality that despite our love for others, there are times when God instructs us to stay away from certain people. It's a truth that brings tension because how do we reconcile our desire to love with the need to obey God's guidance? Especially when that guidance seems to go against the very instincts that drive our hearts. Love, after all, is central to our faith. We are called to love our neighbors as ourselves, to show kindness, to bear with one another's burdens. Yet the wisdom of the Lord teaches us that our proximity to certain individuals can either pull us closer to Him or drag us further away from our divine purpose. It is essential then for us to recognize when our relationships are no longer a blessing, but a hindrance to our spiritual growth. Let's talk about 5 types of people God sometimes calls us to distance ourselves from, even when our hearts might say otherwise. First, there are those who constantly drain your energy. These individuals do not add to your life, they only take from it. They have a way of sapping your strength, leaving you exhausted emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. No matter how much you give, there's never enough. You pour out, but they never pour back. You invest, but there's no return. We are all called to love, but we are not called to become weak in the process of doing so. In fact, God desires that we grow stronger, more capable of fulfilling the unique purpose He's placed in us. But when we stay too close to people who perpetually drain us, we risk neglecting our own purpose, our own well-being. Even when we love them, we must recognize that sometimes love means stepping back. It means protecting the energy that God has entrusted to us so that we can be the people He has called us to be. Then, there are those who bring negativity into every situation. They are not just people who have bad days. They are individuals who see the world through a lens of constant criticism, defeat, and hopelessness. They speak words of discouragement, doubt, and fear, even when the atmosphere calls for faith, encouragement, and hope. You see, the power of life and death is in the tongue. When we surround ourselves with people whose words are constantly negative, we begin to internalize that negativity. What we hear has the potential to shape who we become. In fact, the Apostle Paul encourages us to be mindful of what we allow into our hearts and minds, for what we think on shapes our actions. When we are continually exposed to negativity, we begin to move further away from the hope and faith that God wants us to walk in. Even though we may care deeply for these people, God sometimes instructs us to distance ourselves so that we can guard our hearts and protect our minds. Remember, the enemy can use negativity to erode your confidence in God's plan for your life. Third, there are the people who don't want to see you succeed. These individuals may not always express their envy overtly, but their actions, attitudes, and even words tell a different story. They are quick to celebrate your failures and hesitant to celebrate your successes. They operate in competition rather than in collaboration, and they measure their worth by comparing themselves to others. The problem with keeping close relationships with such people is that they subtly undermine your progress. They encourage you to settle for mediocrity and prevent you from pursuing the greatness that God has planned for you. God calls us to rise above, to move forward, to strive for excellence. But those who wish to see you fail cannot support the divine purpose you're called to fulfill. God will sometimes tell us to step back from such people, not out of hatred, but out of the necessity to protect the vision He has placed in us. Success in God's kingdom doesn't come through comparison. It comes through faithful obedience to His calling, and sometimes that means leaving behind those who hinder that obedience. Another group of people God may ask you to stay away from are those who operate in deceit. They are people who live in lies, distortions, and falsehoods. They manipulate, control, and deceive, often for their own gain or protection. They make promises they cannot keep, say things they don't mean, and behave in ways that are far removed from the truth. The danger in staying close to such individuals is that they can easily lead us into deception ourselves. They can influence us to compromise our values, our integrity, and even our faith. God is truth, and He calls His people to walk in the light. But darkness cannot have fellowship with light. And if we stay in close proximity to those who are entrenched in deceit, we risk being drawn into their web of lies. Sometimes God's call to distance ourselves from such people isn't because we don't love them, but because He loves us too much to allow us to be entangled in their deceit. Lastly, there are those who hinder your spiritual growth. These are the people who, no matter how much you try to teach them, guide them, or encourage them, are not interested in growing or changing. They refuse to move forward in their walk with God. Their hearts are hardened and their minds are closed to the transformative power of the Holy Spirit. They are content to stay in the same place, to remain stagnant in their spiritual lives. Now, it's important to remember that we are all on a journey and everyone moves at a different pace, but when you are around people who are actively resisting growth, who are content with staying in a place of immaturity and spiritual infancy, they can slow you down. God may call you to step away from these individuals, not out of a lack of love, but because He has more for you. You can't carry others to the next level when they refuse to move themselves. Staying close to people who hinder your spiritual growth will keep you from becoming all God has called you to be. God's plan for your life is too important, too precious, and too powerful to allow anything or anyone to distract or hinder you. It's not that God doesn't want us to love people. In fact, He calls us to love even our enemies, but He also calls us to walk in wisdom, to recognize when certain relationships are no longer beneficial to our spiritual well-being. As we grow in our faith, we must trust that God knows what's best for us. And sometimes that means walking away, even from those we love. So listen to His voice, trust His guidance. And when He calls you to stay away from certain individuals, know that it is for your protection, your purpose, and your growth. Energy drainers are individuals who seem to constantly take from you without ever giving anything in return. These people can be found in every part of our lives: family, friendships, work, and even church. They are the ones who consume your time, your attention, and your emotional strength, leaving you feeling exhausted and empty. They do not contribute positively to your life. Instead, they create an environment where you are left feeling as though you are always giving but never receiving. The problem with energy drainers is that their presence can subtly shift the focus of your life. You may start out trying to help them, but over time, their constant demands and the emotional weight of their problems begin to outweigh your own well-being. They may require constant validation, need constant support, or expect you to always be the one to listen to their struggles without ever offering you the same level of care. Initially, you might be compassionate and willing to help. But when their behavior continues without any change or growth, it becomes draining. You are left trying to pour into a cup that is perpetually empty. The impact of being around such people is profound. You may start to feel as though your own needs and desires are secondary to theirs. Your dreams, goals, and even your relationship with God can begin to suffer because you are too busy trying to solve their problems or manage their emotional turmoil. Over time, this imbalance can lead to burnout, frustration, and even resentment. Instead of feeling empowered and motivated, you begin to feel defeated, as though your energy is being depleted just to maintain the relationship. These individuals may not even be aware of the toll they are taking on you. Their constant neediness or lack of reciprocity can be a result of their own struggles or insecurities. However, that does not change the reality that in order to thrive and continue fulfilling your own purpose, you must recognize the necessity of boundaries. The more you stay in close proximity to energy drainers, the harder it becomes to preserve your own emotional health and spiritual well-being. Their constant pull on your resources prevents you from moving forward, growing, and becoming the person you were created to be. Negative influencers are people whose words and attitudes consistently undermine your sense of hope, purpose, and faith. They seem to have a special ability to inject doubt, fear, and discouragement into every situation. Their perspective on life is one that is colored by pessimism, often seeing the worst in every circumstance. Even when something positive occurs, they find a way to focus on the potential failure or the risks rather than celebrating the success. When you're surrounded by negative influencers, the effect can be insidious. Over time, their constant stream of negative thoughts and attitudes can seep into your own mindset. Instead of focusing on the opportunities and possibilities in your life, you start to see roadblocks, obstacles, and limitations. Where there was once optimism and vision, there now may be hesitation, doubt, and fear. Negative influencers drain the joy from the good things and amplify the anxiety surrounding challenges, making it harder to move forward in faith. Their words can be deceptively subtle, often disguised as concern or caution, but in reality, they are expressions of fear, skepticism, and a lack of faith. Be careful, they say. What if it doesn't work out? I don't think it's a good idea. While some caution is healthy, negative influencers take it to an extreme, casting shadows over every decision you make and eroding your confidence in the path God has laid out for you. Their influence can pull you into a cycle of second-guessing yourself, questioning whether you are really capable or whether God's plan for you is truly worth pursuing. In relationships with negative influencers, it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain a positive outlook. Every dream you share, every step you take toward growth is met with doubt or discouragement. Instead of lifting you up, they weigh you down, convincing you that your goals are too lofty, your faith too naive, or your aspirations too unrealistic. They are quick to remind you of your limitations, often pointing out past failures or perceived weaknesses rather than encouraging you to step out in faith and embrace the fullness of your potential. Enemies of success are those who intentionally or unintentionally work against your progress and growth. They may not always be overt in their opposition, but their actions, attitudes, or words reveal a hidden agenda that hinders your advancement. These individuals often operate out of jealousy, insecurity, or competition, and they struggle to celebrate your achievements. Instead of rejoicing in your success, they are quick to highlight your shortcomings or to downplay your accomplishments. Their inability to genuinely celebrate you for who you are and what you've achieved is a sign that their hearts are not aligned with your prosperity. These individuals might show a facade of friendliness, but their behavior can reveal an underlying desire for your failure. Whether it's through undermining your confidence, subtly sabotaging your efforts, or offering advice that discourages you, they create an environment of resistance. They may discourage you from taking risks, pursuing your dreams, or stepping into new opportunities. Their motives often stem from a sense of rivalry or insecurity, and they see your success as a threat rather than something to support. They may try to keep you in a place of mediocrity because their own fear of success and the unknown makes them uncomfortable with seeing others thrive. One of the insidious characteristics of enemies of success is their ability to sow seeds of doubt in your mind. They know just how to question your abilities or challenge your choices in a way that makes you second guess yourself. Their words are crafted to make you feel as though your dreams are too big, too unrealistic, or not worth pursuing. They may subtly convince you that you're not capable or worthy of achieving great things, creating a barrier between you and your goals. Even if you love these people and value their presence in your life, the reality is that their attitude can prevent you from fully realizing your potential. The danger in staying too close to such people is that their negative influence can prevent you from moving forward with confidence. You may begin to doubt your vision, your talents, and the purpose God has placed in your life. When surrounded by those who do not support your success, it becomes increasingly difficult to stay motivated and focused on the path ahead. Instead of being inspired to push forward, you may feel like you are constantly fighting against the current, exhausted by the weight of their discouragement. Deceivers are individuals who manipulate the truth, twist facts, and operate in falsehoods. They may appear trustworthy on the surface, but beneath the facade, they are skilled at weaving lies and manipulating situations and distorting reality to serve their own purposes. Their motives often stem from a desire for control, power, or personal gain. And they use deceit as a tool to maintain their influence over others, whether through lying, omitting key details, or pretending to be something they are not. They create an environment where the truth becomes hard to distinguish from fiction. The danger of maintaining close relationships with deceivers is that their falsehoods can easily entangle you in their web. They may manipulate your emotions, twist your understanding of events, or make you question what you know to be true. As you become more deeply involved with them, it becomes harder to discern where their lies end and where the truth begins. The more you listen to their twisted versions of reality, the more you risk losing touch with your own convictions and values. Deceivers have a way of making you doubt your own judgment, often leaving you feeling confused or uncertain. Another troubling aspect of deceivers is their ability to disguise their intentions behind seemingly good gestures or words. They may appear kind, generous, or well-meaning, but their true motivations remain hidden. They exploit your trust, using it to gain access to your resources, your time, or even your emotional investment. What makes deceivers particularly dangerous is that they don't just lie. They manipulate the entire situation to make themselves appear as the victim, the hero, or the one who has all the answers. And they craft a narrative that serves their agenda, drawing others into their lies and causing those around them to question their own perception of reality. Maintaining close relationships with such individuals can slowly erode your sense of trust in others. You may find yourself questioning the integrity of people who genuinely care for you, as the deceiver has clouded your perception of what honesty and loyalty look like. The longer you remain entangled in their deceit, the more likely you are to compromise your own integrity, even without realizing it. Deceivers make it difficult to see the truth clearly, leading you down paths that ultimately harm you and prevent you from walking in the light that God calls you to. People who hinder your spiritual growth are those who, whether intentionally or unintentionally, create an environment that prevents you from progressing in your faith. These individuals may not always be antagonistic, but their actions or attitudes make it difficult for you to move forward in your walk with God. They may be stagnant in their own spiritual journey, unwilling to grow or mature in their understanding of God, and this stagnation can begin to influence you. When you stay close to people who are spiritually immature or resistant to change, their lack of growth can hold you back from reaching the higher calling that God has placed on your life. Such individuals may not see the need for transformation, and their complacency can become contagious. They may become comfortable in their routine, in their understanding of God, and in their relationship with Him. They may not seek to deepen their faith, study the Word, or engage in practices that cultivate spiritual growth. As a result, when you surround yourself with these individuals, you may find yourself drifting into a similar complacency, settling for spiritual mediocrity instead of striving for the fullness of what God has prepared for you. Their lack of spiritual hunger can make you feel as though growth is unnecessary or even burdensome. Additionally, people who hinder your spiritual growth may not encourage you to seek deeper intimacy with God or to pursue the higher call on your life. Instead of pushing you toward greater understanding, they may distract you from the things that truly matter. They might prioritize worldly concerns or perpetuate attitudes that are in direct conflict with the values of God's kingdom. Their focus on materialism, entertainment, or personal issues can drown out the call to holiness making it harder for you to stay on track with God's purpose for your life. Moreover, they may even mock or undermine your efforts to grow spiritually. They may criticize your desire to pray more, read the Bible, or attend church, making you feel foolish for trying to live according to God's standards. Their attitudes can cause doubt and discouragement, making you question whether the pursuit of God's will is worth the effort. By remaining in close relationships with such people, you may inadvertently limit your spiritual potential, keeping yourself tethered to a level of faith that prevents you from stepping into the fullness of God's plan for your life. The relationships we maintain in our lives significantly impact our spiritual, emotional, and mental well-being. While God calls us to love everyone, He also calls us to walk in wisdom, discernment, and obedience to His voice. There are times when the people around us, no matter how much we care for them, become hindrances to our growth and purpose. The 5 types of people we discussed: energy drainers, negative influencers, enemies of success, deceivers, and those who hinder our spiritual growth, who are all individuals who can pull us away from God's intended path for our lives. These relationships can be subtle in their influence, but their effects can be profound, leaving us stuck, drained, or even lost in a state of spiritual complacency. It is important to recognize that distancing ourselves from such people is not an act of hatred, but an act of love for ourselves and for the calling God has placed upon us. God has a plan for each of our lives, a purpose that is often bigger and more significant than we can even comprehend. As we strive to live out this divine calling, we must be mindful of the relationships we nurture. Sometimes staying close to individuals who are toxic or stagnant can cloud our vision, slow our progress, and hinder our capacity to fully embrace God's best for us. The wisdom to recognize when certain relationships need to be adjusted or even severed is vital. We cannot allow our love for others to compromise the greatness God has in store for us. We must protect our hearts, minds, and spirits so that we can grow in the direction He is leading us. While we are called to love all people, that does not mean we are called to remain closely connected to everyone, especially those who will drag us away from our purpose or cause us to live beneath the potential God has designed for us. God's desire for us is not to live in isolation, but to live in alignment with His will, growing stronger in faith, purpose, and love. He wants us to surround ourselves with individuals who encourage, support, and challenge us to grow closer to Him. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, growth, and a shared desire to fulfill God's purposes. As we discern the people God has placed in our lives and the ones we are called to distance ourselves from, we must trust that His plans are always for our good, even if they require us to make difficult decisions. In the end, the relationships we choose to nurture should align with our purpose, support our growth, and reflect the love and truth of God. When we take steps to distance ourselves from those who hinder us, we make room for new healthy connections that will help us fulfill the calling God has placed on our lives. We are not meant to walk this journey alone, but we are called to walk with those who will help us become all that God has designed us to be. As we move forward, we must trust in God's direction and know that His guidance will always lead us to the best relationships and the fullest expression of His will in our lives.